introductions, and I will start. So I'm Megan Imperial. I work as the policy analyst with the SFPUC, and then we'll kick it off.
Okay, this is Jean Wu. I'm with Custom Power Solar Inc.
And I'm Barkley Sanders, Treasure Island resident that's hoping that we all can solve this problem together, essentially.
Bob Beck with the Treasure Island Development Authority.
This is Jamie Carubin with the Treasure Island Development Authority.
Blue Jean. Please enter your meeting ID or audio code followed by the pound or hash sign.
Peter Somerville with TIDA.
Please enter your meeting ID or audio code followed by the pound or hash sign.
Yeah, this is Ramon Boek with PUC.
Please enter your meeting ID or audio code followed by the pound or hash sign.
We have someone who's trying to join the meeting.
Hi, this is San Lorano with PUC.
Enter your meeting ID or audio code followed by the pound or hash sign.
Hi.
This is Manuel Ramirez with SFPUC.
Okay.
Please enter your meeting ID.
So I'll let you, unless people from TIDA or PUC, respectively, or Haney's office has any more comments, I'll let the Jean or Tom take it away.
Okay, Tom, you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. So this proposal is a proposal for a power system that includes solar on a number of units on Yerba Buena Island, and then a centralized energy storage system that would be located roughly where the current generator is on Yerba Buena Island, and would provide a self-contained system that could power the island, pretty much power the entire island indefinitely, even if the grid failed. It could provide power when the system, when the grid fails, pretty much indefinitely, and could in addition provide energy resources back to the grid in events where there is excess power available on the island.
Tom, could I stop you for just a moment? So you're saying it's on Yerba Buena Island, but I thought the actual location was Treasure Island.
I'm sorry, I mean Treasure Island, yes.
Thank you.
Although, because Yerba Buena Island is also apparently powered from Treasure Island, Yerba Buena could potentially also receive benefits from this system as well.
And then Tom,
the next slide?
Yeah, no, great. Please tell me when you want the next slide. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Sure, okay. So the goal of this system is to provide electric power for both Treasure Island and Yerba Buena Island. It would provide energy storage backup to operate both islands if the grid fails. It provides a clean energy source with energy security, and also provides energy storage, which in addition would help reduce utility costs. It could reduce costs for utility payments and could receive credit for excess generation. Next slide. The phase one could be implemented immediately. In phase one, we're looking at adding solar modules on 120 housing groups. Each one of these housing groups, I'm assuming, contains 4 to 5 individual units where people are housed, and there may be 4 to 5 or more people within each one of those housing units. Each one of those housing units would have effectively 12 kilowatts of solar. The aggregate total power then for the island in terms of generation would be 1.4 megawatts of PV, of photovoltaic solar power. This would be equivalent to 2.4 gigawatt hours of power generated annually. In addition, we're looking at up to 6 megawatts of power capability with 6 megawatt hours of energy storage that would be housed in 3 2 megawatt hour energy storage units, battery units that are 40-foot containers with automatic transfer switches. If it fails, the island would be powered automatically by the power system from the battery units and augmented by any solar power. Next slide. In terms of the solar installations, there's several options. Since we're aware that the long-term plan for the island is to upgrade a lot of the units to different housing, one of the concepts here was to implement a solar installation system that would be removable, completely removable, and that could then be transported to the new units when those become available. So on the right-hand side of the picture here, we show this system which we've implemented in residential systems throughout the Bay Area already. That's a strapped roof ballasted system that sits on the roof. There's no roof penetrations and provides solar for residential systems. Optionally, it could be a conventional roof installation, since most of the homes, most of the units on the island are conventional homes with conventional roofing and shingle roofing, and would have conventional attachment to the roof. In either case, they could be removed in the future and transported to the new system. Since the solar is capable and has warranties of 25 plus years, we would want to see these systems reused if in the future the systems were upgraded. Next slide. So the total projected cost of the solar portion of the system at $2.40 a watt would be roughly $3.5 million. The storage portion at $850 a kilowatt hour is roughly $5 million, and so the total is $8.5 million. However, it should qualify for disadvantaged community rebates. The state self-generation incentive program, equity and resiliency rebate program, has a rebate level of $850 a kilowatt hour, which would effectively pay for the storage. The SOMAH program could potentially also pay for the solar. The final cost then could be zero. Next slide.
Wait, before you go, I just want to interject something really important to know. Go back.
Sure.
Right. So one of the things that just came out last week is that, in fact, the SGIP equity for large-scale battery systems is actually oversubscribed at this point for non-residential and residential in PG&E territory. There is the high probability that a lot more money will go into that program starting July 1st, but the actual amount of money that's been allocated to non-residential, i.e. commercial, large-scale, greater than 30 kilowatt hour, greater than 30 kilowatt hour systems in that program did not get allocated any additional money. So what's already happened is it's fully subscribed, and there's a $120 million backlog on the waiting list. So the effort has got to be made to increase the amount of money available in that pot, because there seemed to be an understanding among the policymakers that no one was interested. Well, it turns out people were very interested. They were just waiting for this thing to happen, and then they didn't put any more money in it, so it's already running. So counting on that funding is a little tricky until some other changes are made at the PUC level to make that possible. Just want to be sure that's really clear. Okay, next slide.
Next slide. So this is information directly from the SOMAH website, which shows the tax credit and rebate funding level for the SOMAH program. There are different categories based on tax credits, how tax credits are taken, but there is the potential for most, if not all, of the solar portion of the system to be paid for by this program. Next slide. This shows a description of the SGIP equity and resiliency budget, the qualifications for that budget, which shows the categories for single-family homes, multi-family homes, entities of which Treasure Island should qualify, and also non-residential customers. This program is fairly complicated in that there's a number of different subcategories in this equity and resiliency budget. There is also the SB 700 funds, which have been allocated. It's around $700 million. It hasn't been transferred to the funds yet, but will happen. You know exactly when that's going to happen, Jean?
Well, there's a decision that has to be passed at the PUC, and then the funding is supposed to happen July 1.
But the fund has already been approved, so.
And I want to clarify that this is the CPUC, not the SFPUC.
Yeah, and I don't know if, because the way that SGIP, the self-generation program, is run, as long as you are a customer of PG&E or one of the IOUs, whether it's gas or electric, then you are eligible, as long as you fill the other criteria. What I'm not sure of is how that's structured, because the power from PG&E in this big power line from Oakland, but how it's structured in terms of, you know, I have no idea. That's one of the things that we really need to discuss with you guys.
So this is Manuel.
Okay.
Go ahead, Manuel.
First off, can I? Sorry, I apologize. Can you please mute if you're not talking? I hear a lot of background noise. And then with respect to the SGIP, the SFPUC does not qualify for the SGIP funding. Like you said, only customers of PG&E do, and wholesale customers do not qualify. We don't pay into the SGIP.
Oh, you are a wholesale customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't understand that. Okay, so then that is out as an option. Not possible to qualify for SGIP. Does that mean you cannot qualify for the SOMAH program? Do you know?
I don't know about that. We're looking into it. And we're also checking to confirm the SGIP. I understand that there's some aspects that we may, but again, it's the customer that needs to apply, and none of the customers on Treasure Island or Yerba Buena will be PG&E customers.
That was unclear to me, because I thought they were using gas as PG&E customers, but they're not using gas. They get gas from you?
I don't know about that.
This is Sam with SFPUC. Yes, so for the gas, the transmission line is owned by PG&E and gets to Treasure Island, but we buy and schedule the gas through the Department of General Services, which is a state agency.
Oh.
So they provide the gas for us, and they have the contracts with PG&E to convey the gas all the way to a master metering point on Treasure Island.
Okay, so
And so
the
you get
actual
real-
bills never come from PG&E, is that right?
No, that's correct. It comes from DGS.
Bills from, yeah, so you couldn't qualify.
Yeah. In the future, though, after all the redevelopment is done, the new system, PUC, is not going to be the gas provider, but that will be as part of the future, the new development that will be at Treasure Island and Yerba Buena.
So who will be the gas provider?
At that point, it will be PG&E.
Oh, okay. So then, but how long is that going to take?
We're the provider. I think that's a developer question. I think some of them are, as we know, there's some construction going on already at Yerba Buena. That's part of the first phase. It's going to be as I understand it, it's a multi-phase, multi-year development.
But if they're already developing, that means they're putting in the lines now, right?
They're putting in lines to serve the areas that are being improved, but the existing structures on the island will continue to be will not be PG&E customers ever. It's only as the new system is built out will the facilities and buildings within that new area become PG&E customers. All of the existing distribution system on the island will continue to be owned by the city and be city customers.
Okay. So the funding for the SB 700 Equity and Resiliency goes on to 2024. So it's a 5-year funding plan. And I think it's going to be like you could still work on the projects up till 2026. So if this construction goes into place anytime between 2020 and 2024, and we can put something in the queue for the new construction, then the new construction can get the service. But the old construction would not be capable of getting the battery or the solar. That's a correct understanding? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, we can confirm that and respond back to everybody. I don't want to say something that's incorrect, but that's my understanding.
Okay, I'm just trying to clarify. The other thing is, of course, under this SB 700, it's really geared towards people who suffered PSPS events or who are in a Tier 3 or Tier 2 high fire district, which I don't think applies to Treasure Island. Am I correct?
I think that's correct. And like Sam said, you know, the power will be is being provided over from the East Bay side. So that's really our connection to the grid, and I don't believe that is within the Tier 2 or Tier 3 fire district.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So the value of $0 appears to be rather unattainable under the present eligibility criteria. Am I correct?
I think so. And we're looking at the financials that you guys included in the slides just to confirm all of that. But that is our initial sort of thought of what we may qualify for.
Okay. So I'm just kind of pointing out that these are specific criteria that were created because of the fires and the fire season, and yet you guys at Treasure Island seems to be at high risk of having power shutoffs, and whether or not that is something that the PUC needs to be approached about, I'm not sure. But under the present rules, it would be difficult to qualify. Right. Okay. Just want to double check that. Thank you.
And could I ask a question? It's Barkley speaking. Or comment. Even if there's not funding from a state level, I'm wondering, because of the amount of money we're spending for the new community coming in, from numbers that I've heard, I could be incorrect, we've spent about $243 million to do like remediation and other improvements for the new people moving in. So generally from what I'm trying to understand in this, why we will or won't spend money to solve this problem, like even if we can't get state level funding and other things like that, will this project still move forward? Like, are the Treasure Island residents, like, from our rent money that we're spending in and stuff like that, why can't, like we donated, or TIDA donated like a few $1 million for like art installations and other things? So I guess the question is, even if we don't get state level funding, like, will this project still move forward? And like, will there be investments for the current residents to like install batteries on the apartments and throughout the grid, like this whole proposal?
So Manuel or Sam, I don't know if you want to speak on that a little bit more in terms of those opportunities moving forward for redevelopment. And then also wanted to flag Jamie if you wanted to speak on anything in regards to eligibility for TIDA and PUC.
Well, this is Sam. I don't know that I can speak to that because I'm not quite sure whether the question was for the future, but is it for what I'm hearing here is that the proposal is for the interim, for the existing, and that's something that, it's not part of the redevelopment. It's not part of what the city, PUC does not own the existing system out there.
Yeah.
So not yet. So my understanding is we're prohibited by, I think there's a city law that we cannot spend ratepayer dollars on areas or property that we do not currently own. And that could be checked with the city attorney. That is my understanding. And that is why we've always operated from the perspective of being a contractor, where we spend the funds that we collect through the sale of the commodity through the existing system, and that is what we are limited to. So the investments here are I don't think it's a PUC question, Megan.
Well, I think this is Bob. I think we're here to learn more about this proposal, technically how it would work, what the costs would be, and so forth. But I think in response to your question, Barclay, the development is replacing the entire electrical grid on the island, and is going to begin with the replacement of the main switchgear that serves all of the distribution on the island. And that work is underway as we speak. The area behind the ship shape is undergoing surcharge, which is the last step in the process of geotechnically improving the site where the new switchgear will be installed. And the PUC has ordered that switchgear for installation by January of next year. And so there are improvements happening to the electrical grid that will greatly improve reliability and performance that are underway. As for this specific proposal, we're here to learn more about it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was interested in learning, if this is something that someone has a handle on, is the amount of money that's being paid by residents who are already there. Is there enough overage or profit or whatever that consideration is to put that money into a fund to provide funding for a project like this, since it's obviously not something you're going to do all at once, maybe step by step? And or can you quantify the amount of money that people are losing because they cannot work, their refrigerators go out, the power outages are interfering with their lives and potentially causing some harm? And can you quantify that and say, well, we'll ameliorate that, and that value can be included in the value of what this system could provide? I don't know how that's quantified, but it seems like there is a benefit to making life more livable for people on the island.
Hi, this is Ramon from PUC. I just want to follow up on Bob's comment. We really want to get through your presentation, see what you're offering, and then comments and get back to you, and also send you any questions that may come up for clarification. I think most importantly, we want you to get through with your presentation.
Why don't we just go ahead then, and I'll start going through the rest of these slides. Next slide. Gene, I think you added this. This is another another diagram which shows the disadvantaged community low-income census tract this is from a different source, Gene?
This is from the ARB, the Air Resources Board, Disadvantaged Community Low-Income Census Tract Lookup, which basically moves from one criteria to a number of criteria, and Treasure Island fits into 3 criteria: the census tract, the disadvantaged community, and the low-income community. So it fits those criteria.
Okay. Next slide.
Sorry, just a comment. This is Jamie Crubin from TIDA. Just to respond to Megan's just earlier ask about eligibility. And since you were going through these DAC slides, it's my understanding that the reason why these slides are highlighted for the SGIP and the SOMAH rebate programs. But as other folks said earlier on the call for SGIP, we are not, it's my understanding we're not eligible. And then likewise for SOMAH, because we are a municipal publicly owned utility, we are also not eligible. So that's just more of a comment on some of how this sort of proposal is laid out in terms of assuming that there could be potential rebates to offset costs. It's just based on our research over the last few days since I received this proposal, it doesn't appear that we are. So yeah, I would just sort of be aware of, as we go through slides and the proposal on the financing standpoint, that some costs, some rebates that we thought would be available to offset costs or may not be available to us specifically.
Right, but I think it's something to keep in mind is if there are policy changes or some consideration of revisiting these questions in the future, that someone from the San Francisco City and County could look into making some adjustments to these requirements so that it's possible to include low-income and disadvantaged communities there, because they're still low-income and disadvantaged whether they fit into the criteria that are written out or not.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's a good point. We'll definitely keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Next slide. In the following slides, I'm going to make some comparisons of the financial value of the power and the greenhouse gas savings from the generated power and the use of the energy storage based on PG&E net energy metering rates. So the highest or the least expensive or least costly rate that PG&E offers is the E20R rate. That will be transitioned to the B20R rate soon. But based on the current rate, the energy value of the system based on this size would be equivalent to $472,000 a year in terms of energy savings. It would generate 2.4 gigawatt hours of power, and in terms of greenhouse gas savings, which is one of the main goals of the state, it would be the equivalent of saving 875 tons of greenhouse gas a year, a very substantial quantity. Next slide. One of the things that we do as a business is we provide a system analysis of both rates, comparing different rates and greenhouse gas savings. This slide shows sort of the two extremes of rates, rate savings that would be possible with a system of this size. Considering it as a large aggregate power system the savings relative to PG&E using the E20R rate would be, as I indicated, on the order of $464,000. If you considered it relative to the EV2 rate, which is the residential rate that all solar plus storage systems are now eligible for in PG&E territory, it's more than twice that. It's $900,000 worth of savings. So it just gives an example of the range of values that this has if this were considered a PG&E rate system and net energy metered system. There's additional data here. I won't go into all of it. The one important aspect of this I do want to point out is that the battery storage alone represents 70 to 80% of the savings of the system, because typically what it would do is store energy during the morning when the solar system is producing power, and then it would use that during the peak rate period in the evening, typically now 4 to 9 p.m. And so it provides considerable additional savings. Next slide. So just as a general outline, the solar system generates energy in the morning. It's stored in lithium iron phosphate batteries, and then it would be used typically during the peak periods to reduce demand. When you're considering E20R rates, it's reducing peak demand as well, and demand charges as well. And it would offset power from the grid during peak rate periods and would maximize value. It also provides power in the event of grid failure, and the renewable provides charging from the sun daily. Next slide. The graph is so complicated, but it shows a number of different details of what would happen in the event of the solar system operating off-grid in the event of a power failure. This is a fairly typical example. It shows how the battery would be operating the grid during periods when the sun is not shining, and then would be being charged by the solar system during periods when the sun is shining. In the event that there is excess power and it is connected to the grid, that excess power would be sent back to the grid. You can see that here in the time periods from 1 o'clock to roughly 4 and 5 o'clock, when the battery has been filled from the solar and now is capable of providing power back to the grid. And in addition, it's also powering all the loads. This is I'm not sure what day this was used as an example, but this is a typical example from the spring to fall periods. In the winter, there may be days when there's consecutive days of no sun that you may run out of power from the solar system. But I would say, based on the size of this system, for 300 plus days of the year, it could operate completely off-grid if needed. This chart also does show what the greenness of the grid is. I think that's the dotted blue line, and there are also graphs showing the impacts of greenhouse gas savings for the battery alone and also the solar plus battery. Our company was a part of the state greenhouse gas analysis of solar and energy storage and its impact of greenhouse gases a few years ago when there was issues raised about the value of energy storage and how it impacts solar storage. So we're intimately knowledgeable about the state and the state's use of greenhouse gases and the impacts of storage and greenhouse gases. Next slide.
Sorry, Tom, this is Bob Beck again.
Sure.
I just want to make sure I caught something that you said earlier. I was trying to follow the curves. But you were saying that based on your understanding of the island demand, that the proposed solar generation combined or supplemented with the storage would be capable of supporting total island demand in most instances?
Yes, for at least 300 out of 365 days of the year, it would be able to provide power continuously from one day to the next, yes. The only exceptions would be long periods of heavy clouding in the winter.
Hey, Tom, this is Ramon with PUC. So can I ask you a basic question, just clarify my understanding of how the system works? So let's say we have a long outage happening at the island, okay? Let's say we had an outage that lasts, let's say, the full day. So you have the solar that's installed in the roof, they're distributed, total size is 1.4 megawatts. You have a 6 megawatt battery. I don't see how you can charge a 6 megawatt battery with a 1.4 megawatt solar. And during an outage, you're going to rely on the solar to provide power towards connected to the homes, right? So what's going to charge the battery?
So let's go back to that. Go back to the previous slide. Yeah. So this slide shows the usage is the solid blue line. This is based on a fairly typical CAISO grid power usage, which averaged out is very likely what you're actually seeing in terms of the usage of power on the island. It may be actually lower at night, but this is what averaged over the state the grid looks like.
Yeah, so that's not my question, though. I don't think you're addressing my question.
The battery system itself is capable of outputting 6 megawatts of power. The solar system generates at peak 1.4 megawatts of power. During the solar
that's where
period,
my question
it's charging the battery. Then,
so my question is, we are on a prolonged outage on the island, right?
Sure.
So let's say the same thing happened, our resource got cut off from Oakland. I don't care how sunny it is during the day. So you're going to have and the battery, let's say, already got depleted, right? Because it's a long outage, right? Then now you have the PV system connected locally to the roof. So based on how electron flows, that would probably be used to power those homes they're connected to. What's going to power the battery?
Well, the battery is going to disconnect from the grid back at the connection where it comes into the island. So the island itself and the battery is going to be powered from the photovoltaics on the island. So it would be recharged from the solar on the island during the morning. As you see here, the red chart is the solar. Right.
I don't think, I'm going to drop this, but I'm going to ask this question again.
Can I step in for just a moment? This is Jean. I'm trying to see where the disconnect is in the question and the answer. So the question is, can you actually charge the battery while you're still running loads off the sun? And I believe the answer to that is correct. Yes, you can. And the other question is, what if in situations where you find that your load has increased, because it sounds like you're building a lot of buildings, you actually include a system or a series of systems of generators to back up the battery if needed. Then you have what's known as a microgrid, and actual rules for building microgrids are much more lenient than they are for a standard NEM. So you have a lot more flexibility with a microgrid. So I think this is an interesting and important question, but I think that what we have found is we can run loads here with our small system and charge the batteries simultaneously, and there's really no problem doing that. Whether
So
that
you have,
will be,
yeah,
that
you have
will
a,
be
you have
the
a,
system.
you don't even have a, anyway, I'll keep going with your presentation.
Yeah, no, but this
It's,
is an important question. Thank you.
yeah, but I don't think it's being addressed, so I'll wait until you finish.
Maybe you could rephrase the question and I could address it.
Why don't we move on? Well, let's see what other questions we come up with.
Yeah, let's move on for now, but I've made a note for the question.
Yeah, make a note that we need to discuss this at the end. Thank you.
I would just, all right, let's go on. In terms of the benefits, obviously it would reduce the energy costs. It would provide reliable power. If the grid fails, storage power could operate from one day to the next. And with the exception, as I indicated, that there may be periods, if there are long periods of cloudy days, then the solar would not be enough to refill the battery. But even if the grid is available, the grid can also be used to charge the battery if there are periods of poor solar performance. But in general, the sun always shines every day, even when it's cloudy. Even if there's a rainy day, you have 25 to 40% of your solar power. So even in winter, there is substantial amounts of power, and even on cloudy days, there's substantial amounts of power. In addition, we would like to have you consider adding chargers for electric vehicles for additional value. We do think that in the future there will be a large shift towards electric vehicles, and of course it provides energy security. Next slide. As I indicated before, one of the goals of this proposal was to provide a system that would minimize issues with transitioning to the new housing proposed systems. So we're proposing a system that would allow transferring the hardware from what would be the existing housing to the new housing. The energy storage system would not need to be changed at all. That would just stay as existed. It would only be the solar system that would need to be transferred. The modules and the mounting hardware could be reused with minimal cost. Next slide. The storage should not need to move. The storage is relatively simple to install, would only require one-time installation, and the warranty would be at least 10 years, and we could extend it to 20 years. Next slide.
Tom, sorry, I was slow to unmute my computer. I actually had a question about the prior slide. In terms of a typical installation time, what is we estimated at the beginning a budget of 3.46 for the installation of the equipment. What's the the split there in terms of materials versus labor. Just trying to estimate if we in the later wanted to relocate the hardware to another location, what the costs would be.
I would estimate that based on our current rates, the labor cost is roughly 25% of the whole budget. That a lot of that is, frankly, is permitting costs. Although on something of this size, it might not be quite as bad. In terms of transitioning it from one to another, I would probably estimate that somewhere in the 15 to 20% of the cost would be the relocation cost, but we haven't looked at that in detail.
Hi, and also this is going to be, if needed, many years down the road. So we are not capable of forecasting what labor costs will be then.
I was just curious as it related to initial installation as a form of metric. But thank you, Tom.
Sure. Yeah. I think we were done with this slide.
Next.
Go ahead, next.
Tom, you need to speed up a little bit.
Yeah, so
Sure.
if we can, are there more technical slides that we should go over? Wanting to be mindful, we have 6 minutes left in this meeting, so if there are other slides that we can skip over.
Sure. Yeah, there are not a lot more technical aspects to this.
Got it.
Obviously, in terms of the tenants, it would provide backup if the grid fails, peace of mind for grid outages, reduced cost of energy. Another aspect of this is that we could be using local labor for installing the solar, so it could provide additional jobs for residents. Next slide. Obviously, for California, greenhouse gas reductions, cleaner California, and reduced grid load. This would be one of the larger systems in California, so it would be a significant impact on the grid. Next. This is my understanding of where the current generator is located. We could probably pick this up technically later, but this is where we were looking at the potential locations for the energy storage. Is this correct relative to what you're currently using for the generator locations?
We've relocated one of them to Yerba Buena Island to address some system vulnerabilities in the submarine cable that connects the two islands.
Okay.
One of them is located there. I mentioned earlier the work that is undergoing to install new switchgear at 10th and M. We'll likely relocate the generators to that location when that work is completed.
Okay.
Who was speaking?
That was Bob Beck.
Thank you.
Is there space there that containers like this could be located? At the new switchgear location?
There's not space, but there is currently space where we plan to locate the two existing generators there.
Okay. Yeah, I think these containers are basically almost like the same size as the generators and have very similar characteristics as the generators. So I would think that they could be almost drop-in. I'm not going to say drop-in, but pretty close to drop-in replacements for generators. Next slide. This goes into a lot of the aspects of our company. I have a lot of experience in both the aspects of installing systems and also building solar cell technology, but we can just skip through this. Next slide. Is Calwave on the line here?
Hi, Jim. Hi, Tom. This is Kevin. So, actually, hi, everybody. Sorry for I couldn't log on the computer, so I'm using my phone to dial in right now. So, Tom, I couldn't see the slide. So, if you could help me to just explain what the Calwave is. I think you know, you knew that already. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Calwave is our partner in doing commercial projects. In our business, we have been primarily involved with residential solar and energy storage installations. Calwave has done large installations and is also very familiar with the Energport systems that we're recommending for this, which also, and in general, our attitude towards building these systems is to provide systems at the lowest possible cost with the highest reliability. Calwave also fits into that category in that they also build systems with high reliability with relatively low cost.
Hi, this is Megan.
For a long time.
I want to interject here for a second and note that it is 1 minute to 4 p.m. And so I want to check everyone's availability, if they're able to stay on for 5 more minutes to wrap things up, or if people have strict time constraints.
Yeah, I can stay 5 more minutes. That's about it.
Sure. I don't know. Gwen, do you want to add any more additional background information about Calwave?
I'm not sure it's not enough that you pay for it. Yeah, I pay you that. Yeah.
All right, can we go to the next slide? I just want to kind of move this along. This is Jean. So these are examples of projects that Calwave has done, and I'm going to send a note to Cohen and see say anything more about Calwave. So I would say that if you have more questions, you can certainly look them up online. But they have done many large systems in some of them in China, many of them in the U.S. Next slide. Okay, so this describes
the equipment.
Right.
This is just some of the examples of what we would recommend for equipment in terms of providing high reliability, low cost, using modules with embedded microinverters, and then the Energport system for the battery storage. These are all CEC and code compliant systems. Next slide.
If you could get one pulling one just for the other one, so the battery for the PV would be great. Yeah. If you don't see me here after that you come in, if you don't see me here, probably I'm on my way to pick up the yeah. Yeah, sure. I bring the notification here. Yeah, just wait. Yeah.
So I think there's someone who's not on mute. We have about 3 minutes left, so I want to be mindful.
Sure. This slide indicates the warranties on the various components of the system. The storage system comes with a 10-year warranty, can be extended to 20 years. In our experience with dealing with lithium iron phosphate, we anticipate that these will likely go as long as 20 years easily. They do degrade over time. The typical warranty is that after 10 years they have 80% of capacity, but typically they're greater than the PV systems come with manufacturer's warranty of 25 years, which means they typically have 80% of power they're guaranteed to have greater than 80% of power after that period, but typically a greater than 90% after 25 years. Inverters typically come with a 10-year warranty and also can be increased to 20-year warranty. Next. Stick a line diagram where in this proposal we're looking at the three containers. I don't know, we've already kind of discussed this, but this sort of diagrammatically shows the different components. If you want to go to technical, I could go into this in more detail later. Next slide. These are technical specs of the system. Again, we could go into that later. Next slide. A little photograph of what they look like. Typically access is from either internally or externally with these doors. Next slide. One other aspect of lithium iron phosphate that I wanted to emphasize, unlike the Tesla Powerwall systems, lithium iron phosphate basically can't burn. The electrolyte is non-flammable. There are plastic components which can burn, but the main electrolyte itself cannot burn. So they're much safer than other battery systems. This is one of the main reasons why we have been using them. They're also better in terms of temperature coefficients and also lifetime. Typical systems are 5 to 10,000 cycle lifetimes. So considerably beyond the 10 to 20 years that we're quoting here in terms of warranty. I think we've kind of covered a lot of these storage advantages. I'm not sure I need to go into them again. They generally allow you to store the energy during the morning and then use it in the evening. They can run from one day to the next. And they also have value in terms of the grid.
I want to go ahead and pause for a moment and be mindful of people's time. Whoever needs to jump off, feel free to do so. If you're able to stay and finish this presentation, it seems to be we have a couple more slides left. So
yeah, we're basically almost done here. This is just wrapping up and summarizing the points that we've already been over. I don't know that I need to reiterate them again. Maybe we should just jump right into questions at this point. I think we're
yeah, so if folks have questions and are able to stay on the call, please feel free to do so. If you do have another meeting, as it is 4:06 right now, please let us know. I know Courtney from Haney's office has jumped off. She texted me a while ago, and so I want to pause right now to see if anyone needs to hop off.
Do you have any? Maybe we should just go right into questions. Do you have any additional questions?
Yeah, I have a question. It's Barkley speaking. Generally, if the island needs to be sectioned off because the grid is bad, like you could place these could you place these batteries in different spots of it? So, say, because the grid, from my understanding, is all one big grid, and if each housing unit or such, like you could place those batteries in those locations, so it kind of like sections off the grid if someone hits a pole in one part of the island. Like, could you just place a battery there, I guess, like to make it a more distributed system?
Yes, absolutely. That's completely another potential alternative. We could install battery systems on individual units. I would think that another preferred alternative would be to put a battery system on each of the housing units, on the 120 housing units. Basically divide up that 6 megawatt hours into 120 units, and then that would provide security for each one of those units in the event that there was a power failure in a different portion of the island. The only drawback to that is additional cost and additional time. It would be somewhat more costly. I mean, if you want, we could put together a proposal that would look at what that cost would be, but it would be more cost, and it would require more time to install all those additional units. Plus, if the system in the new housing proposal, if there's new those units would also have to be moved as well, so there would be moving costs to those systems as well. So that was the reason why we didn't propose this at the beginning. But you're right, it would provide more security, more energy security, if the battery system were broken up into smaller units.
Great, thank you.
So I want to open up the floor to questions from our engineers and from TIDA and PUC to see if it looks like everyone's still on the call. So if anyone has questions. Oh.
I have, I think there are some questions, you know, where I have some questions for the PUC about our system and system architecture and how things will be integrated. But I think one question I had, kind of linked to Barclay's question, is the proximity of the storage to the panels. Right now, you have you propose that the storage be by hangar 3. We might actually potentially consider it closer to the residential area, but just in terms of the panels are just going to put power back onto the grid here on the island, and then the batteries would draw from the grid. That there's no limitations on proximity of the storage to the proximity to the location of the generation?
No. The only issue is the transfer switch, and it would seem that transfer switch, you would want that to be in between the grid and the external driving grid and the grid of the island, so that in the event of the grid failure, that the battery and the solar system could be providing the power to the island. But since I think that's likely all going to be together anyway, in this switch hardware that you're building, that should be fairly straightforward.
Okay, awesome. So I think that wanting to be mindful of everyone's time, we can also, if no one has any immediate questions at this time, we can send over a list of questions potentially next week that we have, that we can follow up and we can get more in depth with this proposal.
Yeah, sure. Please feel free to send them to email on mine, the trusted Custom Power Solar, and also CC Gene, and we'll be happy to help you any way we can.
Okay, great. Does anyone else have any closing remarks before we all sign off?
Hi, this is Gina. I wanted to see if it's possible to get a rephrasing of the question that we didn't quite get to on the charging of the battery while the sun is shining and using the power at the same time. Is that, I forget if that was Ramon?
Yeah.
If you could send over that question again, then let's try and figure out whether we actually understand the question and can answer that question to your satisfaction.
Yeah. So basically what I'm trying to say is if you're using the energy from PV to power where you put the PV to, what are you going to, how much is left of the PV in order to charge a much higher battery system? But yeah, we'll send you a question.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with how it's wired, so I'm just thinking that would be good to look at that.
Well, yeah, you also got to look at where the battery is going to be located. I assume that will be located on the high voltage side, and then you're going to have your PV located on the low voltage side. There's a lot of holes in the way it's presented, so maybe we just don't have a clear picture.
Right, right. And also there's also the possibility of you might want to add solar on some other surfaces, parking lots or commercial or some other surfaces, right?
It would be helpful for us if we could also understand what is currently in the works for this switchgear and hardware, because we'd want to obviously adapt to what you've already got in mind and already planning, so we minimize any alterations or changes that would be needed to accommodate this. So if you could send us any information that you have on what you're planning or is in the works, that would be helpful also.
Thank you everyone so much for joining, and we hope this has been helpful and sparked some interest in providing some backup and also potentially income power for the island, because if you have enough power to send it back to the grid, you may be able to actually make some income on it. I'm not sure how that works since you are a PUC, but in general there are a lot of proposals right now for using big batteries as a part of the main grid in the CAISO, and that could be something that materializes over the next few years. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone, and thanks for dealing with some of the technical difficulties. Again, it is 4:15, so I'm going to go ahead and close this meeting. Next steps are that we're going to compile, TIDA and PUC will compile some questions, get back to you all on your proposal, and that will include some of the bidding processes and other technicalities that we're going to have to look into.
Thank you, Megan, for all of your help. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And I just had one comment. If in general you guys can share updates with me that I can share with the community, I try to just let people know what work you guys are doing so they don't feel like you guys, it's just a comment, but it's not like my personal feeling. Some people just might not be aware of what work is being done to mitigate this. So if you're willing and can share any updates through this process, I can feed that to the community.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we are working to get some information to Haney's office. So we will be funding all information through the supervisor's office, and I'm sure that they will send out to the respective constituents. Okay, wanting to be mindful again, but thank you for all of the information, and have a good rest of the day and enjoy your weekend.
Yes,
you also.
too.
Thank you.
So much. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.